what's up everyone? Welcome to Upstream Fly Guy. Today we're going to be tying up a pretty cool variation to the Quilldibomb. This is going to be particularly useful if you're ever fishing very swift currents and need to get down in a run. If you're fishing deep pools, 7, 8 feet, this is going to help with that. I call it the Quilldibomb. Reason being, we're going to use a huge tungsten bead head and using pretty similar Quilldigon style, which has a very fast sink rate. But the bigger tungsten bead head definitely helps out with that. So to start off here, we have a size 14 jig hook. I use Hannock 450. And then we have a 4.0 millimeter gold tungsten bead head. We're also going to be using gray thread for this. So similar to the Quilldibomb, less is more. Try and really use as little amount of thread as you possibly can. Go ahead and after you get rid of the additional thread, cut that off. We're going to be using some Coq de Leon feathers here. And again, just from a bulk standpoint, I would definitely recommend only about, honestly, 2 or 3 to keep this from becoming too bulky. Really, the goal again is to sink as efficiently as possible, and the more you have on this, the harder that's actually going to be. Go ahead and cut off any excess. For the tail, honestly, just a smidge past the bend of the hook, and that'll work just fine. After you secure that in place, go ahead and work up towards the front end of the bead. And from here, we're going to use some Vivus Pearl Tinsel, actually as the hot spot of this. So go ahead and cut that off. Again, just from a bulky standpoint, we're going to be using small. Everything is small, and the least amount of buildup, the better. So after you've secured that in place, you're going to give this a couple wraps around towards the back end of the hook, and I'm actually going to re-wrap it around. Since it's small, it gives you the ability to do that without adding too much to it. And we're just going to secure that in place. And when you feel like you've done that, go ahead and cut that off. Now, with Polish quills now, they come in pretty much a variety of colors, all that good stuff. I've been using pink a lot, and this actually worked really well for me when I was fishing for brookies up in Maine. So ever since then, I've kind of stuck with pink, I've stuck with yellow, but you could always do orange, you could do red, you could do olive or natural. Honestly, whatever size or whatever color you want, it's going to work just fine. So basically what we're doing here, we're going to go ahead and just put the quill up in that bead head. Now as you can see, my bead head's spinning around as it wants to because it's obviously pretty big and I didn't add any super glue yet. So I'm just going to work that up, and I'm just going to keep, I'm just going to give it some build up towards the bead. And now you can see it's pretty much secured in place. And I'm going to come back down. Try not to overlap too much into where you put the pearl tinsel in. Otherwise it's going to just kind of cover that and you're not going to be able to see that hot spot. From there, I definitely encourage you to have some form of hackle pliers. These are going to be incredibly useful in this process. Otherwise, you're going to find if you try to do this by hand, this is just going to unravel every time you try and secure it in place at the end, and you're just going to be pretty frustrated. So do yourself a favor, get some hackle pliers. You can even make these at home. It's fairly straightforward. What I'm doing here, so every quill on the edges of it has a dark variation to it, or a darker spot to the pink. So what I'm doing is every single wrap, I want that dark to kind of be on both sides of it, so it really kind of acts like natural ribbing. And when you feel like, you'll be able to tell when you got it on there pretty good. So this is should work. And now we're going to use that gray thread. We're just going to secure this this quill in place here, and then go ahead and just trim off the excess and give it a couple wraps around. So moving on to the next step here, I'm just going to add in some super glue that's going to secure the thread in place and even some of the quill as well. I'm going to go ahead and give it a whip finish. And go ahead and snip off that thread from there. So one of two things that you guys can do from this point. It's pretty much done. You can either go right into the resin and just start coating it with resin. However, me personally, I think it looks a lot more realistic when you add some nail polish to the head, especially with this jig hook. Basically, it's going to add that sort of, I guess it's going to make it look a little bit more like, you know, an actual bug that's floating through a current when it has some black nail polish on there. Now with this big bead head, you really want to make sure that you get down. So when I'm doing this, I'm going down and then up. That way it can really start to fill in that hole of the bead. And just make sure that we're getting as much in there as possible so I don't have to double down on this process. And that should be good. So from here, normally you'd have to let this sit for about 10-15 minutes. Fortunately, I have one ready to go for the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this one in here. And basically to finish this off, we're going to just coat that in some resin. I always use Solaris Bone Dry. Works really well for me personally and has not failed me yet. So I'm going to apply that pretty much all around. If you need to spin it a little bit just to work it in, go ahead, feel free to do so. As you can see here, it's very fluorescent towards the tail, and that's by design. Also, that pink, in my opinion, just is a really, really good color for this. So go ahead, just give it a couple more spins, make you work. Really want to work this into the grooves. The reason resin comes into play for this is it's going to help drastically with your sink rate, which is definitely important here again. After that, go ahead and hit it with UV light. I really only need a couple seconds with this. And that should just about do it. So there you have it, the Quilldibomb. You could use a size 14, size 16, size 18. Just make sure you size up on the bead, either 1 or 2. I always recommend going up just 1, so that way you're not overkill on this. But really, this has been highly effective in getting down in deep currents. The resin coating just helps it sink sort of like a rock. The big bead also helps too, so phenomenal pattern. I would definitely encourage you to add this in. You never know where you're going to hit that deep pool, and if you can't hit depth, you may not actually pull out one of the trout that you're looking for. So it's a great pattern, guys. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Thanks everybody for joining, and hope to see you all next time. Tight lines, everyone.